Hello, how are you doing? The dog.
The front row is a perfect seat. No one bites in there.
There's a cute dog.
Huh?
Sure. Oh. Eh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, oh, nice. Hi. Okay, so I think it's all good. Well, everyone, just to start, my name is Jess. I work currently with Super Team Germany as in marketing events, but I'm also a UX UI designer. It's been 1 year that I'm active in the Solana ecosystem, and and this is my dog. She's gonna be here presenting with me. A lot of engagement. Yeah, there we go. That's marketing, right? And one last thing about me, I was the mentor for Super Team France hackathon last year, rather hackathon. And I was a UX UI designer mentor. And I'm talking about that. Why? Because I would like to ask you one question. When do you guys think is the ideal time to get a UX UI designer for your project?
Last year. Way back in time.
Okay, you're all sure. So you guys have been already in a hackathon project, right? And you guys get your designer when? When do you get your designer?
I'm my designer myself.
Ah, okay. So I didn't target well then. Okay.
Yeah, I would say ASAP.
ASAP. Okay, yeah. I'm saying that because on my personal experience, when I was a mentor, people only contact me very end. And that was very frustrating. That was very frustrating because people don't like feedback when they are in the end of the project. And if you wait until the very end to get a designer, you will realize that a UX UI designer is not only there to make your app pretty. So they are not there to say, hey, you fix the color there. No, it's about structure and strategy. So with a UX UI designer, it's going to also help to validate and to develop the design thinking process of your product, right? Which is basically mostly strategy. When you start building a product, you have to think about the 5 design thinking steps. You have to empathize with your user. So you have to understand who is your user. How old is he? What's going on in his life? His hobbies? Does he have a cute dog? Maybe your product can be related to that. So when you empathize and you understand your user and you do some user research, and that can be indirectly. That means like you do a research on Google or whatever tool you have, or you can also conduct a research with questions. After really understanding user, you can start understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Before the solution, you really need to understand the problem because, well, you can always do like a pretty solution, but if the solution is useless, well, you lost. There's no point of continuing. And then you start after you understand your user, and the problem is that when you start the ideation phase, where you think about finally your solution. And that's the important part, guys, because that's what we're going to be creating for the hackathon, right? And over that, you have the prototype and the testing. Well, we're not really here on this workshop to learn how to become a designer, but it's really important that everybody understands those steps to understand the importance of the designer for the hackathon, for your project, for building a startup. Yes, so on the UX part, mainly, that you're going to start. The UX is about product thinking. It's about understanding the user, prioritize what to build. Like we have a lot of ideas of features, right? We understand, we want to know which features to get. But sometimes too many features can be messy. And on the product thinking part, this is when you understand it. So you map user flows. You have to understand the text from the beginning and after, structuring decision, and be sure that your product is trustworthy and has clarity. Is clear. I'll say that because I know that people always, when they know that I'm a designer, they come to me, it's like, oh, figure what a UX UI designer do, you know, like it's all about, UX UI is a lot about strategy and business development as well. So when the main thing about the UX, the user experience is like, is your product aligned with business goals, user needs, and technical constraints? I know that most of you are very tech, so I think this part of the technical constraints is going to be very easy for you. But you have to, when you develop a solution, is like, does that user need? Is user-friendly? And then, of course, does it go for the business goals? Because, yeah, you can have like a great solution. The user is going to love it, but is it profitable? Is the business happy with that? Because otherwise, you won't have what is needed. So yeah, basically the UX design job is to understand all those three categories and combine them in the middle. And that's when you got a good product. That's why, you know, when your product has a good user experience and can be intuitive, the user is happy, the business is profitable, and it's feasible, yeah, because I can tell you a product that I want right now, but if it's not technical doable. So also when you're doing a product, you really need to understand the core flow of it, to understand what is the main target you have on your product. Like when you begin to the end, what are they going to do when they open your app or your website? And what is the goal end? If it's to end, to make a transaction, a trading. When you know all of that, you can also know all the steps. And you have there, because how to start building a product. You have to first define the user flow. I put an image there, just to make it simple. I know you guys almost want, but it's really important to make the flow as simple as possible, and also to understand the main trajectory of the user, especially also to know how many screens, how many features. That's the next one that I say is the prioritized features based on user goals. And then you put by priority, and also you try to, when you put those categories like business value and complexity and effort, is when you can see which features you should have it or not have it, or you can leave for a second version of the app, which one you're going to have on your MVP especially, you know? Because, well, I already got some feedback from some projects I've done. Sometimes some products, oh, they're cool, but they have so many features that they are not useful, that they are there and it's not good, or it's for nothing, you know? So in the end, an app with a lot of things, you may think that it's cool, but can be overwhelming, and you won't be able to to reach your goal. And then structure of information hierarchy. Well, I think everybody here in tech is most familiar with that, but this also helps to have a better idea of the structure of your app. Well, as I mentioned, you don't need features. You don't need a lot of features. The coolest one, you really need to have your app to be simple, clear, and intuitive. And just to talk a little bit about UI. Well, UI is about rather like the visual part, right? But do you guys think what? You guys expect the app to be super pretty, super what? You're a designer, so I'm not going to think. How you guys would build an app for you? Yeah, I think after everything I've repeated myself. But yeah, exactly. I mean, it should be simple, and it should be able to guide the eyes of people. Like, what's going to be the color of a button? What is going to be the size? You know, like, is the text well structured? All of that will guide the eyes of the user to the key information that you want. And that's the job of a UI designer, to understand, to help the user navigate on your solution and reach your goal. For instance, I know that this happens a lot of Web3, and I know that some devs, at least devs that I've met on the old times, they are really proud, is having a very complex degen solution. I know this solution that I had a friend to explain it to me for 10 minutes why it was good. And in the end, after since he was smart enough to explain me for 10 minutes why it's good, I understood why it's good. But I didn't use it after all. I want to use it because it was good to make money. But I look at that, and the last thing I want to do is be on their website with a lot of information. And it had taken me 10 minutes to explain that. You shouldn't take any time to explain your user how to use a solution. And if you want to still continue on the Web3 mindset, I'm not saying that you guys have, but some people that told me, I also got another dev saying like, yeah, but look, you should build your app like this. We like this complexity. Yeah, cool. Then you're going to build an app for 5 people. And I think that's not like how a sustainable business works, right? Unless you don't have anything to do and you just want to do something complex for fun, why not? But if you want to be like sustainable in the long run, that's how you do it. I don't know, do you guys know any app that you think you hate the user experience, but you use it anyway in Web3? You don't have to say names, but... Or when you, yeah, go ahead.
Soulflare comes to mind. I can barely use their mobile wallet, unfortunately. I'm a fan of the company, and so I keep using it anyway at times, but not as a daily driver because they decided to put the calculation of NFT values front and center, so much front and center that they try to calculate the fucking value of my NFT portfolio before even letting me do a transaction. And that's terrible. I let them know as a kind of bug report as well that they might want to look into their priorities there because people have other priorities in there.
Yes.
I just want to send a transaction real quick. And I literally can't because it fails to load my NFT portfolio values. Doesn't make any fucking sense. I'm surprised for that to be still the case even after the latest update.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's true. That's a good example, yes. Yeah, that's a great example of even what I just said. You know, like you didn't understand the user, you didn't prioritize your needs, and in the end, the goal of the company that should be the transactions is not being fulfilled because yeah, they are interested in doing something else because it's cool. Yeah, maybe it's cool, but people need. Do people want? And you know, like some.
To add insult to injury, if the calculation doesn't fail, it shows me a value of my portfolio of like 30 grand, which is utopian and completely out of touch with reality. So it is not even worth waiting for this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's very frustrating, I would say. That's very frustrating. Imagine having to see your portfolio looking something that you know that is not. Yeah, that's a clear way to lose a user. I mean, or you insist because sometimes there is other background behind to be using a product, but I think that's not how it should be, right? So okay, thank you for the example. Yeah. And what do you guys would say is a good UX UI design example product that you guys think? Okay, we got it. Okay.
Just get on there, you can swap. There's no much text, not much text. Just get press swap, connect your wallet. Easy.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I would say liquidity providing with Meteora.
Meteora.
Nice sliders, very easy, very intuitive, very responsive.
Yeah, that's nice. You, Mike?
Yeah, Phantom is a good wallet.
Phantom, yeah.
Not too much, just the simple stuff, all you need.
Yeah, all you need to do.
Jupyter Mobile even better because the swaps fucking actually work. I love Phantom too, but for every swap I switch to Jupyter just for that because it actually works. It's quick and the cheapest. Most likely.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I noticed that to say good things, you guys raise more your hands than to say bad things. But that makes actually sense because in the end, you know, you're gonna forget about the app that is not good. So you're not gonna be using it, so it's not gonna be on the top of your mind. But on the other hand, when you use an app, when you feel like it's simple, it's intuitive, you're gonna use it over and over again. So you guys were able to recall better a good app. Me, I really recall bad so much about that one because I remember it was a really good solution and it took me 10 minutes for my friend to explain. And as a designer, I felt traumatized.
Like, I personally find drip not a good example. It's like the securing. So once you're in the platform and you want to secure it, it's very easy. You set up the security and it's done. But to explain it to someone and to also even people in Web3 and certain people out of Web3, it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
So I think they really need to do a job there to be able to grow. It's a very important on user experience level and also, of course, interface, but there's a lot of work there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that's true, you know, and one thing that you said, like, you have to explain. No product you should have to explain, you know, like, okay, I know there are some subjects that can be more technical, more different, but a product should be intuitive itself. If you have to explain, there's something wrong. Or maybe it's the wrong audience as well, you know. So you have to understand as well who is your persona and everything. So in order to deliver the right app, and not only like the pretty app, like going on UI again, I don't know, I think as a designer as well, like who is in design normally checks page like a dribble. And sometimes you have like these amazing designs. I don't know if it's already happened to you, but sometimes for inspiration, you see like this super colorful, like graphic design, amazing. As a product designer, I don't know how to do amazing graphs. I do very simple ones because it's more about strategy. But sometimes, you know, especially in the beginning, I was checking that, and I was looking for those designs, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. But just visually, because first of all, looking at someone with so many colors can be tiring for the eyes, and so you won't stay that long on an app. And second of all, you don't understand what you have to do in the end, because for a good product, it's not having the prettiest product, it's about having like the most intuitive and simple app actually that does the job. So yes, if your user have to think your UI design is not doing its job, you know. We want solutions, right? So when you have a problem and you look for a solution, you want something easy, you know. So if you have to think about it, it's going to be another problem. So it's not going to fulfill your dream. So, okay, so how you guys know if your product design makes sense? Like, does your user know what to do next when it opens, like, the page or whatever? Do they know what to do? Is the action button visible and clear? Like, yeah, is the good sizing? Is the good color? Is it have the hierarchy well organized? Is there any feedback after they click? You know, like because well, the interface, not everything is on text. Sometimes when you click, you have the action. Like, did the transaction go through? I don't know if it already happened to you, like that you had a product and you don't know what happened next. You don't know if it was downloaded, upgraded. Yes, I see that you were very. Yeah, exactly. And then there's frustration, and then because you didn't have a feedback, maybe you're gonna send a transaction twice, and then you're gonna have to.
I have a great bad example.
Oh, go ahead.
I participated in the DeSci token sale that was recently making the rounds, and the website showed me a success message, although the transaction didn't go through. It even provided a soul scan link, but the transaction didn't go through. It was kind of weird, and so I checked my wallet, and then, first, yeah, and also it showed it the other way around, that didn't work when it actually worked. And so that lends itself to a terrible user experience. So make sure your status messages actually check out.
Yes.
But yeah, it was very confusing.
Yes, that's true. That's awful. And here we're dealing with transactions. You know, you're not gonna like be risking doing a second one or.
And as a result, I actually bought more of the coin than I wanted to. Yeah, that's actually made a difference.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's a good call, yeah. Does anyone have another example to share?
Smart move from their end, but
I don't think so.
worst user experience possible, so likely not a smart move long term.
No, yeah, it's not a move in long term because, I mean, if your objective is just to make your solution for a few days, why not? Maybe they did a good solution. But yeah, that's the thing about one thing about UX UI is like it has to be a trustworthy product. Your users need to trust, and this is a great solution that he mentioned because he doesn't trust that product. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know if the transition he can do it again. So if you don't trust a business, if you don't see the transparency there, you're not going to continue there. So if your solution is not transparent enough, is not honest enough, people will leave as well. And did you use again?
No, I just know it's a bug. I let them know, and no hard feelings. But yeah, for a regular user, that would destroy trust, and likely they wouldn't come back.
Yeah, regular user. Yeah, and I think the idea also of our business is like, you don't want to invest that much to having to convince someone to something. You know, you should be there so you can use your investments even properly to other important things. And yeah, and then, well, the layout consistency and the hierarchy is obvious, you know, it's like, even like for a slide presentation, you know, like you see the text, the title is big, right? It wouldn't make sense if I would make like a small title and the bigger content, right? You wouldn't understand what I would be talking about intuitively. And the last thing I want to say is like always test with real people, because sometimes we have a solution and we like the solution, but we didn't test anyone. We kept the idea because we think it's good, and it can be good. You know, it has to start with a user. You know, and you can definitely be the first user, and it's even better if you feel like you can use your app because you can create with more passion. But you need to validate it with other people. You need to see if they use, if there is a need, and also if the direction that you want to go, if the features that you want to put is in the good prioritization. So you always have to test. Don't keep this idea to yourself. And you always test when you guys think is the ideal time to test with users your idea. Gonna let someone else answer, huh?
Last year.
Yeah.
As soon as possible, that we have something that we already is running, just to try.
Yeah, you're right. You know, like you should test right away. Today you got an idea. Why you just not start testing and talking to people about it? And then you start developing. You do a prototype, and ugly prototype you already test. But ugly prototype doesn't mean like a confusing prototype. I mentioned earlier how it has to be simple, intuitive. It means it has to be clean. Ugly doesn't mean it's full of information, like an app that you cannot use. But you test it all the time, all the process since the beginning. You ask your users the need and you test until the very end. And then after you launch it, you keep testing it and upgrading. And yeah, well, I think, most was this. This is my coordinates. I have my LinkedIn, my EX there, my Twitter, and I can end live to if anyone has any questions. Like, I mean, you can put questions now. Yes.
I know that people have problems to interact with people about their application. Do you have any recommendations how you can ask people to rate your app or use your app, or who you should target?
Sorry, what is the first question? The beginning?
Like the slides before.
Yes.
You mentioned you have to test with few people, but how should developers test with people? What do you recommend?
Do they have friends to first of all to do it? I mean, I would first recommend doing with people around you. You can ask your mother, you can ask your father. Okay, it's not sometimes the user targets, but you can really start with someone next to you, because even if they're not going to use it, they still can understand what to click or not. You do give some directions, you create a scenario, like I can ask my dad, oh, look, I need to do a transaction in this app. How will you do it? And if someone, even like my father, that is not into the Web3 could understand that, that means that is already something. Then you can do with friends, and then also there is some resource online that you can do some interviewing, testing, that I can look up for that later. And that's it. You can try to, depending on your budget and everything, you can also like try to coordinate some use case testing. And the first step is like, or you just simply come here to our co-working space, to our build station that we're gonna do here in Berlin, and you ask us. I can test. So we have plenty of people here that can test. We are like, what, 15 here today? So there you go. You start testing. You have to put yourself there. Go to co-working, to events, Super Team Germany events, and there you go. Even if you are brand new and totally alone here in Berlin or any other city, you can always contact your local super team, and that's it.
I would also say test as closely to your focus, to your user.
Yes, for sure, yeah.
Ideal user as possible, because it won't tell you much if you let your mother test your hardcore detail.
Yes, of course.
Because she doesn't even know what wallet it
Yeah.
is. It will not provide a clean interface for your mother to understand.
Of course.
Hardcore detail product.
No, yeah, of course. You're definitely right. You should always go to their target audience. But what I meant, yeah, talking to your father and stuff is just like you can also still put a scenario and just make it intuitive, because I know some people, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily do it with my dad, but I know some people, like, they have hard time sometimes talking to some person. So for personal issues, I say that you can start with that, because if you put a scenario, like a simple scenario, and of course, depending on the app, if that person is also capable of doing that, that means that it works really well. But definitely, yes, you cannot base your app on your mom's opinion, especially your mom probably is going to say that it's great. Exactly.
I was just on a call with Maurice yesterday, and he gave me the advice to talk especially to people who are not my friends. So to get the most honest feedback, even just with your pitch deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. But I meant like where to start, because I feel like sometimes some people don't know where to start, and this is a good start, especially because when you do something on the first time and you're explaining something out loud, you can realize some stuff by yourself. Then when you launch yourself to the most important groups, focus groups, it can be, yeah.
Maybe one remark on that. There are like books specifically for testing and talking to humans. So for everybody who is interested in how to do testing, definitely do not talk to friends and not to family, because they will be biased. They will tell you everything is fine, great. Go to like maybe Solana super team members who don't know you very well. They will be brutally honest, and that is what starts.
Yeah, super team is the best solution.
We're your friend. We're still good at playing devil's advocate. So.
Yeah. No, it's just like some easy exercise that I learned when I was just studying doing product design. Some people really have hard time to go out there to meet people that they don't know. And yes, it's never reliable that people close to you, but some people, I don't know, that have really hard time. So if you don't know the first person can be that one, but it cannot be. And also, like, you can also remember that people are biases. Also, you have to really know how to ask people. You can never ask, like, do you think this app is good? Even if it's brutal, honest people. You already guiding them to say that is good. So try to also formatting your questions correctly to let people answer by themselves. Yeah, if people say this is good, and sometimes people don't want to answer, and so they're gonna say yes. So that's also an issue.
I also want to say, if someone wants feedback from someone who's not so well into tech and understanding things like you, please ask me. Happy to give feedback.
What do you do?
I'm a coach, actually. I'm helping people transitioning careers. So I'm like a little project with a friend here. So I'm just looking into the space and I'm like, what's this? What's this?
Yeah.
You're on the roll.
That's a dog. That's a cat.
Yeah, you had a question?
What would be a good question to, like, if we just said the question wouldn't be as good because it would move someone in that direction, how would you ask that question without showing someone the direction?
Well, first of all, like something like I said, is this app good? Something like, what do you think about this app? Is already not good or bad, you know? Like, you have to try to make the question as neutral as possible. So, yeah.
I'm just curious, is it okay to copy interface of something that works very well and very smooth?
Yeah, copy is 100% copy, no, but yes, of course, yes, of course. That and yes, yes, honestly, yes, and that's what designers do often. You know, we inspire ourselves what is working, like, and I have some products that I'm so obsessed about their interface that every time that I have like a project, that's the first thing I do it. I get inspired and well, of course you cannot copy because if people directly also associate to other brand, they may feel like some lack of originally, or they may feel like, okay, I can use the other one. But yes, every single time that I personally do design a solution, I always check others that is working, and I try to apply to my interface and do the same. And always give also the personal touch and the differentiation factor. Because yes, of course, when you create a business or you create a product, if it's exactly like the other one, I mean, unless you know that the other one has like a problem that you can overcome and improve, great. But if you do something that is exactly copying like the other one, you know, yours, you still have to have an added value to succeed. But yeah, definitely, you not only you should always check other solutions to see what is working. Okay. Yes, I hope that this was helpful. Yes. Yes, and I hope you guys enjoy my dog as well. Okay, thank you.
All right, for everyone online, we will have like a 5 minutes break and then we will go on with the ultimate hackathon cheat code. So to learn a little bit like tips and tricks for the hackathon. And this is going to be led by Patricia, who's our Super Team Germany lead. So yeah, stay tuned for that in 5 minutes.
Moment. Test, 1, 2. Passt. Kann ich schon anfangen oder wollt ihr mir sagen?
Alright guys, we'll continue with how to build a pitch deck, so feel free to sit down in front, like, and we'll start right now.
Very much so, yeah. So good. I'm happy for you two in the first row. Hopefully, who knows? Okay, so are we live online? Okay, perfect. Perfect. So let's kick it off. Hi, everyone. Sorry, you two, would you mind? Thank you. Okay, so welcome to this one. It's not a pure pitch deck workshop. It's more about how can you leverage your pitch deck and also what can you do when you join a hackathon and you're supposed to show traction, but you have no traction yet, right? So I'm Patricia, for those of you who don't know me. I lead Super Team Germany, but I'm also a former VC. So I've judged a lot of startups for funding for Innovexus Ventures, which is actually a French VC. I work with the European Commission as an expert, and I judge for 100K grants, and I did this for the 3rd year in a row now. I used to work for Google for Startups, also for grant funding, and then finally I was judging for the local track, for the Germany track, for the Solana Radar hackathon last year. And what I've seen across Web 2 and Web 3 even is that a lot of founders make the same mistakes or do things that can be very, very easily corrected. And this now is an attempt to just share what kind of tips I'd give to people that are submitting in a hackathon. So the very first one is very obvious, nail your pitch. So you know what happened to me last time when I was here in September and people or teams were working furiously to match the deadline and then submit for the Colosseum Hackathon, is that they completely neglected the pitch because they were trying to get the perfect code together, right? So I do remember this one guy who came to me who was like, you know what, I kind of forgot my pitch and like I haven't made the slides yet, but the code is perfect and it's working. And sadly, this is not as much a developer competition as it's a startup competition. And how Colosseum works is you have to submit 2 videos this year. And everyone, every judge, no matter if they're technical or not, they will first look at your pitch. And if the pitch is bad, they will not even bother looking at your GitHub, at the code, at anything technical, right? So this is why you must portray this in a way so people understand what you do and that it's kind of halfway interesting.
2 videos, 1 pitch, 1 product?
Yeah. I think it's not called product. I think it's called like technical deep dive or so. You find this on the Colosseum one. But one is just the pitch and the business side of things. And then the other one is I think, product deep dive, technical deep dive. Yeah, 3 minutes.
Each 3. All right.
Can someone fact check? Is that, or is it 4? I don't want to say something that's incorrect. I remember 3 minutes, but it's not 100%.
Like 3 minutes was always the one.
Yeah.
I don't know, like since it's 2 videos, it's a bit different.
From my memory, it's 2 videos are 3 minutes, but maybe it's 4 minutes. But you know, it shouldn't change much. It's not 10 minutes, that I know for a fact. Okay, so what do you have to do? This is not a comprehensive pitch workshop, right? But I guess you can just go online and there's a bunch of just templates and things on how do you do a pitch. But these are really some tricks or some tips that I'd like to see more. So everyone building something should have a one-liner describing what they do. You need this for your Twitter, you need this for your website, and you also need this if you speak to anyone about what you're doing. So for example, we're doing a volatility farming protocol that is special because of something, you know? So try to really make sure you can explain what you're doing in one sentence that actually is understandable to most people out there. Punchy, problem-oriented, and short. Then very obviously detail the problem and why existing solutions don't work. Make sure you speak about users, potential paying customers, keep it very, very simple. And then if you can find them somewhere, speak about numbers and statistics that help you make your point, yeah? Not speaking about market size here, and I'll come to this later. Then talk about your solution. That should always be the bulk of your presentation. So in general, you see at the bottom here, text slides. So text on slides is like the lowest common denominator that you should have. Way better is design mockups. And then of course, the best is if you have working code. So with that working code, you can showcase your solution in action, talk through how it works and how it solves the problems you have shown people that are there. Founder market fit. So you must introduce yourself at some stage. And by this, I don't mean that you say your name or say what you've studied, but you must somehow bring across why you are the person that can make this successful. You know, so what kind of competitive edge do you have or your team that others don't? And this is what they always call like founder market fit. Like, have you had 5 years on Wall Street and you have, you know, noticed all these problems that a specific DeFi solution can solve? Or, I mean, anything really that sets you apart to be the person that these guys can entrust you with their money and that will make it a success. Yeah, so what I mentioned earlier. Yesterday, we had a call with Matty from Colosseum, and he actually also included the first point in his things that people should not do. So at this super early stage, please do not include any revenue projections, like any forecasting. Can you guess why?
It's not clear yet.
Yeah, it's not clear. Like, this is way too early to project. I mean, that slide is pointless, yeah? Is just does not make any sense. The second point is my personal opinion. There will be people who tell you that you can include market sizing, but equally, you know, maybe you've all seen these slides with the total addressable market, the TAM whatsoever, and it's like these big circles that are like, oh, this is a $3 billion or $30 billion market, we address 1% of it, so this is how much we have. And like, yes, hypothetically, but it doesn't tell me anything about your ability to actually capitalize, even build this and make this a success. So I personally don't like market sizing at this early stage, right? You can do it later on once you have revenue, traction, paying customers, but here wouldn't work. And then also be careful if you say that you have absolutely no competition. Like, you can point out that you are in a specific niche that no one else has done yet because of a variety of reasons. But if you say we're doing something that no one ever has done before, none of the big companies tried, none of the big ecosystem players have tried, I am the first and only one who had this idea, that's just a bit odd, because why would not anyone else have thought of it or have thought of something similar? So I think you can definitely point out that you're doing something that is unique, but just don't ever say that you have no competition, no one has ever done it, because that's a red flag. And then instead, share the story of why you can make it happen, right? So I think all investors are always looking for the founder that can make it through all the pivots. You know what a pivot is, everyone? Pivot? Yeah, genau. You will pivot. I mean, I don't even think I know a single founder who has not pivoted, who's running a business. So really, it's more about showing what you as a person can do and what you have to make this successful.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
About the competition, is it interesting that you already give give an idea of like, I've done research and I know that there are competitors and they do this, that, but we differ
Yeah.
that this way.
Yeah, that's fine. But again, should not be the focus, like the bulk of your work. You can do it, but
you can have it by hand, but you would, when it would be coming up to be able to show it.
Colosseum doesn't do it, but you know, when you send out pitch decks, there are these softwares that you can use that show you how many seconds or minutes people spend on each slide. And you would be, I mean, I did it at the time when I raised for my startup, and sometimes just founder friends tell me, and basically everyone flicks through, like, and if you're lucky on like the solution slide or on the demo, like your product demo, they stay for maybe 8 seconds. That's it. And yeah, so don't overestimate how much time the jury spends, because they get dozens of this and they're very busy people, so they just want to go through. Yeah. I made an angel investment the other day, and the product is so-so, but I was really convinced by the founders. And I think had I not known the founders and like known that they are really committed and capable to deliver, I wouldn't have done it. And I think that's super consistent with what everyone else is doing. Yep.
So where you have the point with the judges being on every slide for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
How important then the literally first slide they see? Because wouldn't that, I mean, if I would be like a founder and I would see on the first slide, this is BS, then I would just skim through it, I wouldn't care probably. So how important is the first or second slide? Say it's one of the most important slides or not?
Yeah. The first slide should always have your tagline or, you know, this one sentence, what you're doing, the first or the second slide. So this is clear immediately. It's very important. Yeah, because I think it's like first impressions, right? Like you see someone and then you know fairly soon, like, do you like them or not? And there, sadly, it is the same. Yeah, and also keep in mind, there is so much, like the volume of submissions is humongous. I think last year, I don't know if anyone has the numbers, it was thousands of 1,300. And I don't know how many judges they had, maybe 40 maximum. So just imagine how much they had to do. And these are not, I mean, these are busy people. They're, you know, you can check, like they are very successful and busy. This is not their top priority. So, yeah.
What I always like to say, why we're doing the build station, there's 1,300 submissions global, but there's 30, 35 around that local.
Oh, yeah.
Your chances are way higher here.
Way higher. And then just to wrap up the pitch deck section, so if you've never done a deck and you just want a neat template, there is a super team pitch template that you can base your pitch on. Hopefully the QR code works. You got it?
Yeah.
Perfect. So you can just use this as a baseline. You can change, obviously, the colors, fonts, whatever, but I think this is a good start. And then this website also has bonus resources. Okay, but now to the part that is, I think, even more interesting, because usually what sets the winning projects aside is always traction. Do you all know what traction means in this context? Yeah?
Users using the product.
Huh?
Users using your product.
But it's not launched.
That could be followers on Twitter.
Yeah, that's one example of traction. Yes, you had your hand up.
Basically, yeah, more or less all of that. How many users are already on the project? How many users are interested in going on the project? How many people have you already got behind you to use that product?
But hackathon projects, most of them have not launched.
It's community, like if there are people already talking about it on platforms that where you talked about it, you have space about it or something, or you have a meetup already to ask questions about where to go.
Yeah, all of this. So just what I wanted to make clear here is that how do you show traction when you don't have a product that has launched yet where you can count the users? You know what I mean? Because hackathon, you will not be, I mean, maybe you can launch, but that would be absolutely amazing. So what do you do if you are in this early stage building process? So the very first thing, you must create a company Twitter. You must create it ASAP. Literally the second you roughly have a name for whatever you want to do, create it and use it. Explain what you're doing. Is building in public, right, that you might have heard. You can literally say every single day, oh, today I will take care of this, this, and this. And I've encountered this and this problem. And people like reading this. And jury members also like seeing like that you take it seriously, that you have structured, that you have been working on this consistently.
Do you choose one platform on Twitter, or do you also go on other, like, so there's other, like Farcaster or Instagram or LinkedIn, or do you just choose one?
I mean, for this hackathon, for this purpose, is all Twitter. To be very honest, yeah. Sadly, I wish it was different. If you want to win here, do it on Twitter. LinkedIn is super. I love LinkedIn. It's an amazing tool for business contacts, clients, for any other sort of thing you'll do later on. But this now, Colosseum Hackathon is all Twitter. Yeah. I think many of the judges don't even have LinkedIn accounts. But definitely, I mean, you can do that. And if you somehow manage to get some sort of traction on LinkedIn, you can refer to it in your pitch. But the focus is hands down Twitter. Then get a landing page, reserve a domain, make a landing page, and with that, build and grow a waiting list. Yeah. So this is one way of doing it. Of course, there's many others, but I think the simplest way is to have your Twitter, grow traffic there or farm traffic there, funnel it to your landing page, and then build a list. Email list, in my eyes, is the easiest. And then you have people who are inherent fans or who are interested in your project. And even if it's only 10 of them, it doesn't matter, but you can email them and you can test. And you have something in your hands that you say like, okay, we've tested this, we've gotten feedback, we've gotten reviews of early adopters, and you can really use this. So you could ask for people's emails. Then you could funnel them into your Telegram, or you just ask for Telegram right away. So up to you which platform you use. But this one here is also a very, very good trick that I've seen people use that just have gotten very far. So you create a private beta group on Telegram with all these early, not users is the wrong name, but adopters or people interested in what you're doing. And then you tell them what you do and you test with them. Because this is the best way to get feedback from the market, your potential audience, and then also to tell the jury that you are actually building what customers want, right? So product market fit, like this is how you determine product market fit eventually. Even if there are only 10 people, talk to the early followers and bounce ideas off them. Could be a viable customer. And then I think Jess said earlier, make sure it's not your mom and your friends, right? So make sure, yes, it could be friends that want to support you, but also make sure you have some people actually interested in the solution you're doing. So your future prospective customers. Yeah, do not. In terms of choosing what to build, do you all know already what you'll do? Or are there some people that are like, I would like to join, but I don't really know what makes sense? Everyone knows. Okay, awesome. We sometimes see that people are like, oh, like AI is such a trend, and then agents and God knows whatever the hot topic is at that time, and then they try to go into this just because they think this will maximize the opportunity to get funding or to be successful. But don't do it, right? Because you should, as a founder, really be, and I don't like the word, but be passionate. So you should really like what you're doing. You should be your own first user. So you can understand what is needed, and you kind of build this not because you want to get the funding, but because you think it's cool and it makes sense. So, but I think if you guys know what you want to do, then this doesn't apply. Your first customer, as I said, and also make sure you use your own product, Because if you don't, you will just run into so many difficulties. I mean, if you're building like a high-end trading tool, build it for yourself, for example, because you are a trader and you understand what traders need and what problems they face and what's on the market that is not good enough. Yeah, might sound obvious, but again, make sure you do something that you yourself would find interesting. And then finally, and this is actually more part of the pitch deck than the others, but make sure you also close with the vision, right? So if you do your pitch or if you do your videos or whatever, and then after the solution, don't just shut it down, but always tell people what your outlook is. Because this is also, oh, Nala, this is also what the jury is looking at is like, what are you actually doing after the deadline has passed? Like, where do you want to take this thing? Ideally, you keep building and you keep your social media active after the deadline has passed on the 16th of May. And make sure that you have a really good and ambitious vision that you communicate. A roadmap, for example. And here, roadmaps also change, right? So people are not going to hold you accountable to the T, but do make sure that you have something that is realistic and ambitious at the same time. Yeah, how will the world be different once your solution is adopted by the masses? Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Do you have any recommendation how long to do this?
So for Colosseum Hackathon, we have to find out if it's 3 or 4 minutes. You,
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
That's the video, the pitch deck.
Yeah, so, but this informs the deck, right? So you can't show 15 slides if you only have 3 minutes. Usually I would say between 4 and maximum 7, 8 slides here. And this is probably already too much for this specific purpose, right? For this short 3-minute pitch video. Yeah?
I mean, what people did in the past is that they basically submitted a longer pitch deck also with like, I don't know, 10 to 15 slides, for example. But then in their demo video, they only went into the 5 most important ones. So have like, I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes into pitch deck and then 1 or 2 minutes left also for like a product demo. So they could also showcase something because this is usually also very short.
Mm-hmm.
So if I got right, they did a longer deck for.
Then you just show in the video which you submit, you just show the most important slides, and you submit the whole deck in the additional deadline.
Okay, that's interesting. But that means that the VCs that you're still gonna go through, or for the position that you just go on this slide.
I mean, I wouldn't. I also judge. I like, yes. I mean, maybe if there's like 1 in 100 that blows you away, yeah, you go through the additional materials, but otherwise, no. Why would you?
Yeah.
No. I mean, look, I never say never, and maybe there are some jury members that take this extremely seriously and block out 3 weeks just to judge, but I doubt it if you look at who is actually on the jury for Colosseum. So I would really say nail the mandatory 2 videos. And then if you still have time and if you anyways want to continue with these...
Are you sure that it's
2
2 videos?
videos, yes. 100% sure, it's 2 videos. Yeah, it's new this year. And maybe you can check whether the second video is also 3 minutes, but that's how I remember it. First one, 3 minutes, pitch and business side. And then the second one, 3 minutes, tech deep dive.
So tech, you mean then code, not UI or UX, that's in the first one. Like tech deep dive is more like Solana and how it's linked to the roadmap of Solana and what are the features that are being put in here? I don't know.
The first one shows the business viability. Okay. The first one shows that you will be able to make money with this in the future and you will make your investors a ton of money.
So UI and UX is probably the second one also.
No, it's more about business viability versus technical viability. The first one shows really business viability, and the second one highlights the technical viability because many projects propose something that's a beautiful business but technically impossible.
Yeah, or the other way around.
Or the other way around, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But that being said, I mean, this is just the Colosseum, this is this hackathon, right? If you're taking this to an actual VC, you will have to have slides that are long. You will have to have more than 5 slides. And just a bit more meat, and then also the pitches will be longer than 3 minutes, but well, average pitches, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 minutes or so. It's normal.
Yeah, with VCs, I assume you also even adapt your slides depending on the VC you have in front of you. If somebody who is more interested in a specific part of your project, you might go a bit deeper there.
Yeah. Ideally, you have your one slide set and the VCs come after you. But yeah, I mean, always depending on also which stage, right? If this is for your first check or whether you're doing a pre-seed or seed or, yeah, what's you're at. Yeah.
How is it with showing like, what sounds like when you, for example, said not here and etc. You should leave out, or it's better to leave out for some judges or some VCs. How is it like with showing numbers in the pitch deck? For example, how much revenue do similar protocols generate, stuff like that. Is that okay, or should we just leave out all these numbers and generally keep it as easy as possible?
Numbers are good, but just the judges, like smart people, right? So if there's something that literally you just pulled from Sky or that's that they smell bullshit, right? So if you have data backing up what you want to do, or data showing why there's a gap, or also data showing how much money competitors make, why not? Why not? Case by case, right? Don't steer clear from numbers. That's not what I meant. I just don't put these financial projections because this is just way too early for that. Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Ja. Hoffe ich. Ist das noch an?
This. Hello, hello.
Okay, everyone, we're continuing with the next one, a workshop on product market fit and go-to-market essentials.
Great, hi everybody. Yeah, welcome to From Idea to Impact, Product Market Fit and Go-to-Market Essentials for Web3. Definitely a very important topic for every Web3 founder. And I'll give you my most important learnings about this topic from what I experienced. I'm Radko Albrecht. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Bitbon. We're also based here in Berlin. We run a Web3 application or decentralized application, which is a tokenization engine. It allows you to create tokens and other smart contracts in a no-code way. So it's not really targeted to developers, but rather to projects who do not want to write their own smart contracts. And you can basically create the entire token lifecycle, including token lockers, crowd sale contract, etc. And so I'll share some of the experiences that I made building Bitbond when it comes to the topics of go-to-market and product market fit. We also launched a token. It's a tokenized security called the BB1 token. So I don't only have product experiences, but also token creation and raising funds through a token. But today I really want to focus on product and go-to-market related topics. So let's get started. I want to walk you through a few steps around actually thinking about your product, planning it, and then launching it. The first step that I think makes a lot of sense to do is to think about your vision. What is actually the fundamental problem that you want to solve, and what is the value that your product provides? This is something that makes a lot of sense to start with, because that will inform a lot of decisions that you are going to make later on. And of course, it's quite hard to finalize these things very early on because it's an iterative process, but still it makes a lot of sense to think about that and to write down a bold vision and then to develop everything around your product and your go-to-market strategy based on that vision. On every slide, by the way, I'm going to show one remarkable example for the topic that I'm describing. And here for the vision, I think Ethereum definitely stands out because if you look at the time when Ethereum was developed, founded, and then ultimately released, I think they had an extremely bold and visionary outlook on things because Ethereum was a major further development compared to Bitcoin, which at the time was the only really major blockchain and cryptocurrency. And Vitalik Buterin, together with a few others, have formalized the vision that a blockchain does not necessarily only have to be digital money, digital gold, what was the initial intention of Bitcoin, but they formulated the vision of a decentralized computer. And at the time, a lot of people had no idea what that actually could be, and they already projected, what a decentralized computer could actually be and what it could mean. Maybe not all of us are as smart as Vitalik. I think, personally, I believe he's one of the smartest guys still in crypto and in Web3. But again, it does make a lot of sense to formulate a bold vision because that can then translate into very concrete actions and operationalizing actually what you're doing. So once you got your initial vision, things become a bit more tactical and practical. The first thing that makes a lot of sense to do is to identify and define your ideal Web3 user. It's also not new to build companies and to build products around the user. Maybe Amazon, when we look outside of the Web3 world, is a really good example. I think Jeff Bezos, over many years and from very early on, has highlighted and pointed out many times that being user-centric is extremely helpful to build stuff that people want. Because I think the biggest risk that you have as a startup is to build something that people are not interested in. It's a secondary question how you monetize products. It's not even something that I'll talk about today. It's definitely an important question, but you can only start to monetize things if you build something that people actually want. And in order to be able to build something that people want, you have to know who is actually using your product. And therefore, defining your target audience is one of the most important things that you can do when thinking about product. Who will benefit the most from your product? And what is driving the users? Why would they be using your product? What kind of a need do they have? Of course, Web3 is already in itself a relatively narrow segment, but it helps to then even be more specific than just Web3. Because within Web3, you have people who are rather speculators who want to make short-term gains on meme coins and other types of investments. You've got long-term investors, and they behave in a completely different way than short-term traders. Then you have people who are mostly in for the community and for the fun of it. They might also want to make some money, but that might not be their primary motivation. And you have got some people who do gaming, who may not be interested in trading or investments. So even within Web3, there's a good spectrum of users. I think based on one of the more recent estimates, there's roughly 100 million active users in Web3, meaning that there's roughly 100 million people who at least once per month in some way interact with Web3 and Web3 applications. And that means that's a pretty sizable group of people. And you cannot serve all of them with the same product, obviously. So you need to understand who is actually your target user and with what type of product can you serve them. Here the example is Nifty Gateway. They have been very specific to target art collectors, for example. So they didn't go to everybody. Someone who wants to simply trade tokens to make short-term gains might not be interested in what they did. So they were catering or are catering to a very specific niche. And this is something that often can make a lot of sense, starting to own rather a small part of a market that has very specific needs, but that you can also describe very well. And then once you own one segment, it may be a bit easier to expand into other segments and other types of users. Instead of trying to do a very broad approach and trying to serve a lot of users who have different needs with the same product, this is something that typically turns out to be much, much harder. Or if you want to do that, it requires much more massive marketing resources because it will be much harder to communicate what you actually want to sell to them. The other extreme kind of to make a bit of a contrast is if you run a mature consumer company, you make TV ads or advertise in large major newspapers, then you have the marketing budgets to reach a huge audience. And then a lot of the people who will see your ads might not be interested in your product, but that's fine because you have the marketing resources to go so broad. But typically as an early stage startup, you don't have those resources. You are really limited in the time and the budget that you have. And therefore, the more narrow your target group is and the better it is defined, the easier it will be for you to communicate about your product. Once you have an idea about what your target users look like, it makes sense to define what is actually the problem that you want to solve for them. And you see that these two things are very related. So it's not a process where you would first isolate only the user and define what they look like, and then isolate the problem that they have. Again, this is like almost everything here in this workshop today. It's iterative. You are going back and forth. You are trying to understand the users better, and then you are trying to understand their problems better. So only because these are separate slides, it doesn't mean these are steps that are completely isolated from each other, but it's actually very closely linked. Typically, the users will have some kind of pain point. They might be aware of that pain point. Sometimes they might even be aware of that pain point. Again, leaving the Web3 world a bit, Facebook, for example, was one of the fastest growing social networks, at least at the time. I think if you had asked people before they were aware that Facebook exists, whether they have this problem, how to communicate with their friends, with their family, they probably wouldn't have really recognized that there is a problem. But still, Facebook did solve a certain problem, but people were not even aware that there is one. So as a founder, on the one hand, you may talk to people and ask them, do you have a pain point in this or that specific area, in trading, in gaming, in NFTs, etc. But sometimes the users might not be able to articulate a problem, but you as a founder will take a bird's eye view and will understand, oh, this is how people are using these services today, but if I inject a new product for them, then it might save them a lot of time, it might make them more money, it might generate more entertainment or more fun for these people without them actually seeing it. And this then is also connected to the vision, right? If you have a strong vision, then from that you can translate actually what kind of pain points you solve for people who might not even know that they have a pain point. But of course, ideally, the pain point that you define and the problem that you want to solve for your users, you don't just come up with that, but there is some form of evidence that is supporting your hypothesis. So there is data, for example, that people are spending a lot of money on something where they could be spending less, or you may identify that certain traders are systematically losing money on certain trades, and you may have found a way how they can prevent that, how you provide them with data, or how you provide them with tooling. To give a concrete Web3 example, a big chunk of the short-term trading volume on decentralized exchanges is actually not coming from trades that people place manually, but from bots. So bots are causing a big chunk of the trading volume. It's hard to make concrete estimates, but it can be somewhere in the easily 50% ballpark. So it's a very substantial number. But then still a lot of people are losing money even when they are trading with bots. And so if you can see that, and if you can find a solution how you can improve a bot and come up with a completely new approach, then on the one hand you have a vision and you have an idea what problem you want to solve, which is traders losing money. But there is also evidence, because you can show, for example, based on data, how certain addresses where you can clearly see that they are trading on decentralized exchanges, how they are losing money. There is already tools that allow you to analyze that on an individual address level, but also an aggregate. So if you make use of such data and you can show, oh, there's a real pain point, now I can take a next step and trying to find a solution for this pain point. It also makes a lot of sense to compare what you come up with existing solutions. Sometimes you may run into the risk that you come up with a great idea, but you may not be aware of the fact that there actually is already a solution to the problem. So you may have missed a potential competitor or competing products, and so it makes sense to dig deep into trying to understand what the market actually looks like. And are there alternatives that only you perhaps are not aware of, but that the market is already taking advantage of? Typically, when there is already an incumbent, a service, a product that is already solving the problem that you want to solve in a sufficient way, it doesn't have to be perfect, but in a sufficient way in the eyes of the users, then it might also be hard to communicate and to get awareness for your product. And then also the impact is important, right? If you define a problem that is either too small in its own right, or that addresses a user group that is too small to build a meaningful product on top of it, then it's also quite hard to achieve a successful product. So there has to be an actual impact, and the impact has to be sufficient enough that users are willing to try out a new product, or that they are willing to switch from a product that they are already using right now to your new product. There's always switching costs, right? And so people will only start to use something new if the added benefit for them is big enough that they change their current behavior. Again, whether that's starting to use something new, or whether that's switching from one product to another. A great example here is Uniswap. Generally, decentralized exchanges, in my mind, were so far one of the best ideas in Web3. When you come from traditional finance, then the way exchanges work is that they maintain an order book. There are buy orders and sell orders, either from regular traders or from market makers. And your role as an exchange is to match these orders. That's all you do as an exchange in a TradFi world. And then decentralized exchanges came up with the idea to actually provide automated market making, which is a really revolutionary step if you compare that to traditional financial exchanges. And Uniswap saw this problem, and they have come up with their automated market maker protocol, which was way better than anything else that existed in the market at the time. And that allowed them to have such a strong position in decentralized exchanges that they are extremely dominant. Maybe not on Solana, where Radium, I think by far still has the highest trading volume. But if we look back at the history, and mainly in the EVM chains, then it's really remarkable what Uniswap have done and how they were able to solve a problem, which is the lack of liquidity in secondary trading. Now, when you're defining your solution, it means that you actually articulate in a very concrete way what your product looks like and how it solves the problem of your users. So this goes now into very concrete and very hands-on product planning. This includes what are the features of a product, what are the benefits. I think this is also a pretty significant step in the whole journey. As a founder, when you have identified the problem, this is something that will typically make it really exciting. I'm sure some of you already went through the process. And then when you have the idea how this problem can be solved, that's equally exciting. And then you start to plan and you come up with typically a lot of ideas what the product could look like and what kind of features it can have. And this can be quite tricky because, again, you are normally faced with limited resources. You cannot build a product that has a gazillion of features in just a few months. But normally it helps to get started quickly. It helps to launch a product quite quickly because you will only know whether you're actually building stuff that people want when you show it to people and when they're able to use it and try it out. If you are building a product for 2 years, then you may be investing a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources into something that perhaps people don't even really want. You're putting all of the features in there that came to your mind, but then it turns out people are not really interested in it. The only really somewhat certain way to find out whether you're building something that people want is to present them with the actual product. And therefore, when you define your key features and your benefits of the product, it helps to be quite strict with yourself and to cut out a lot of stuff that you don't regard as really necessary. You have to define a real bare bones MVP, ideally launch it in a few months, 2, 3, 4 months, and then start presenting it to users and trying to understand what users think about it. Because you may be building a product that you yourself find awesome and you really want to use it all the time, but unfortunately, there is a risk that you may be the only one who is looking at it like that. So get it out early. Don't be too expansive on the features that you put into your first product because the most valuable feedback that you get is from users and not from yourself, typically. And that's why testing then comes in place. Try to get something out quickly and try to get it in front of users. Aave is a good example here. Aave was one of the early decentralized lending and borrowing platforms. They started with an extremely simple product. They had one chart where they explained how it worked. It was really bare bones, and it started to go from there. And I think this is the way to go for the big majority of founders, unless you have millions in the bank and you want to come out with a very fancy product and you have a lot of time. For most founders, this is not true. most founders will need to get something out quite quickly. And the only way to do that is to be really restrictive in the product and in the features that you're building. By the way, if you have any questions or comments, if you disagree, if you want to give an example from your, founder story, feel free to do so. Yes.
The question, you mentioned specifically 100 million users in crypto and everything, like in the crypto space so far, which I think the numbers there might be a little bit inflated but you're comparing Web3 alternatives rather than, let's say, the broader market. Do you have advice for like reach beyond, let's say, the existing user base that is applicable that you have to become successful?
I mean, obviously every situation is different, right? It really depends on, are you providing a very Web3 specific solution, and are you potentially competing with somewhat similar Web3 specific products, or is it something that is actually much broader, right? And of course, I would not necessarily generalize it in this way. When you think about raising capital, this example comes to mind because recently we also did a fundraising workshop here based on a token sale. Obviously, the alternative between launching a token and raising funds through a token sale is to going to VCs, which is not a Web3 product, if you will, or not a Web3 way to raise capital necessarily. So definitely as a founder, it helps to define your market rather in a broad way. Because to you, if you are too restrictive in how you define your competitors, then people, they don't care, is it Web3 or is it not Web3? They have a need, they want to satisfy that need, and they don't necessarily look at, is the solution for me a Web3 solution? They will look everywhere, right? And so, yes, I agree with your comment. If you're not very narrow in your target group and in your kind of competing products, it also makes sense to look broader into the world. What kind of other solutions may my target users have access to? Now, once you have an idea what your product looks like, you may already be developing it, you should also start to think about go-to-market. Some people even start to think about go-to-market before they have a product. And start to validate whether there is a market before they start building the product. Again, not every situation is the same, but if you can do that, it's actually very smart. Because validating an idea sometimes can be cheaper, can be more time and more cost effective than actually building the product first and then presenting it to users. Especially one way that allows you to do that is when you start to create a community around a certain topic. This often will also help you to identify needs and then come up with a product based on feedback and based on conversations that you have within a community. Generally, the biggest topic here is user acquisition. How will you actually find users? And if you already have a community, then this community, again, that's talking about a specific product can also be your first user base. I linked a video on this slide from A16Z Crypto, which I think is a great framework to define different go-to-market motions in Web3. They identify 5 different ones. And I think for everybody, it makes sense to look at these 5 go-to-market motions. And by the way, again, it's not necessarily just Web3, right? But it does have a few Web3 specific aspects. The first one is product-led. So if you find something where a product is really needed by users and they see the product and there is a pull, so you don't need to sell the product to these users, but the moment they see it, they like it so much because it's such an important problem to them, then you can have product-led growth and people will just want the product. This is an ideal scenario. And this is something, if you can achieve that, that's probably one of the best ways, to be honest, to grow a product. The second is sales-led. If you have a sales-led approach, you typically have a product where you cater to small and medium-sized enterprises, or even sometimes larger than small and medium-sized enterprises. With retail users, it's normally not cost-effective to take a sales approach. It's simply too expensive to talk to every user. You can do that early on when you want to get feedback, but if you want to create something that's to a certain degree profitable, then sales only makes sense if the ticket sizes, if the price that your users are paying is above a certain threshold. Of course, you will need to calculate your unit economics, so it's not just the revenue that you make per user, but it's also the cost per user that you have. So it's hard to say just the ballpark number. But generally, a sales-driven approach only makes sense for certain types of products that have a certain basket size. Typically, infrastructure products where you cater, for example, to other startups in the Web3 space, where there are certain basket sizes. That's when you can have a sales-led approach. Developer-led is also very interesting, and this is something that's rather a bit more Web3 specific, I would say. When you cater to developers and provide tooling to them, or provide certain features to them that they need, then things like hackathons are a great way, or being developer communities. A lot of the blockchains, not just Solana, but also some of the others, have taken a developer-led approach by providing them. At the end of the day, a blockchain is also a certain kind of tooling, and by saying, well, we have a blockchain on top of which it's much easier to develop than on others. You can use existing programming languages. You don't need to learn a new programming language. The cost is low, the speed is high, etc. So I would claim that Solana and a few other L1s actually took a developer-led go-to-market approach. Then community-led is another way. Community-led is also something that is often used in Web3. Sometimes you may build a huge Twitter account, a huge Discord channel around a specific topic where people are discussing a certain topic. And then out of that community, you can understand what drives them, what their needs are, and then you inject the product and tell them, hey, by the way, we have this great community here. We are always talking about these kinds of problems. Now I'm presenting you with a solution, and here is the product for that. Community-led also typically has a high viral factor, so it's a product that people like to talk about. There are certain products. Sales-led typically has a product that people don't talk about too much, and it doesn't have a high virality embedded in the product. Community-led go-to-market approaches work very well when there is a certain level of virality in the product built in. And then integration and channel partner approach. Sometimes you may have a product that others want to integrate into their existing product, and then you have this partnership and channel-based approach. One Web3 example that comes to mind here is bubble maps. I don't know if you're active on decentralized exchanges, if you trade, and if you look at sites like DEX Screener or CoinGecko or Gecko Terminal. All of these DEX trackers, as you can also describe them, have bubble maps integrated. And when you open a token, then typically there is a link to open bubble maps, and when you click the bubble maps link, it will open a visual representation of different wallets and how they are connected with each other specifically for that one token. So you can see whether there's just a few holders that are sending this token back and forth between them, or whether there is a huge chunk of holders of that token, each of them with a small holding and not linked to each other because they have never sent each other that token. And so this allows you to analyze the concentration and ultimately the rug pull or whale risk in a token. And so bubble maps you can go on the website and you can look up a token on the Bubble Maps website, but that's not typically how people use Bubble Maps. The way they use it is they go to Gecko Terminal, Dex Screener, Dex Tools, etc., and then open the link there. So their go-to-market approach was to go to these different Dex trackers and inject the product there. At the beginning, I think they did it for free, and then at some point they asked Dex Screener and all the others that they pay them for that service because it has become such an important and integrated part of these sites. And lastly, one more comment here. Go-to-market strategy obviously is also related to communication, right? You're talking about your product, you're presenting it to your potential users, and it makes sense to speak the language of your users. Obviously, people on Web3 might use a slightly different language than people in, outside of Web3 in other areas. And so trying to understand and learning, using the language of your target user base is something that can be very helpful, to get your message across. Now, once you have defined, what your product looks like, you may already have an early prototype, you may have defined your go-to-market strategy, then you plan your launch. Now, some people are really particular about this, and they will say, we don't talk about the product publicly, but we will announce that something is coming, and then we want to launch with a big buzz. This can be helpful. However, sometimes you may be able to create a huge buzz early on, and then all of a sudden the interest in your product fades. So you have to think about how much it makes sense to invest into a very sophisticated product launch. Sometimes you may just simply launch the product, release it without a huge announcement, and then have it grow organically and do it that way. And I don't think there is an ideal way how to do that. If you have the resources, then definitely it makes sense to start with a big bang. But if you don't have that, I wouldn't be too worried about it. You can also launch the product silently, get some first users in there, especially when the product has a certain level of virality built in. Then you can very easily do such a silent launch, and then people will start to talk about it and will start to use it more. So the launch, it depends a little bit on what resources you have. Sometimes when you have a community-led approach, also what you can do is you can promise an airdrop. This will create a lot of awareness for your product, and then when you launch it, combine it with the airdrop. That can be another way to get a lot of early users into your product. Then also where you announce the launch is another topic. Do you want to do a press release? Do you have some influencers or KOLs that you work together with? Are there any communities, ideally your own community, but also others that will be excited about the product and that will be happy to talk about it? So that's some of the topics here to think about when you launch. The Blast L2 is one example of a successful early launch. At the same time, it was a successful launch, but now the activity on Blast has cooled down quite substantially. So while they managed to have a nice and successful launch, it wasn't very sustainable. If you look at the activity on Blast today, it's not very big. So therefore, I wouldn't overestimate the launch. It is important, yes, and if you can start with a buzz, then definitely do it, but don't be disappointed if you think, well, I don't really have the resources, I just want to get the product out. Don't wait for too long. Don't be discouraged by, I don't, have the resources to make a big announcement. Just launch the product and get user feedback. That's way more important than having a huge launch. Then as a next step, once the product is out, once you have user feedback, you will need to validate whether you have product market fit. This is extremely hard to measure, by the way. So there is no one metric where you could say, if this goes to green, we have product market fit. Unfortunately, it's much more nuanced than that. I put I think a pretty practical definition here, which says product market fit is the degree to which a product satisfies a strong market demand. So there has to be a demand, and your product needs to satisfy that. But it also needs to satisfy it in a way that people are actually using the product without you having too hard to sell it on them. I put here the pull versus push bullet point. If you have to sell your product too hard, then it might be an indicator that your product isn't actually really satisfying the need of users. If it's really hard to sell it, then you might have to think about tweaking the product and trying to find a new approach, because it might not actually be as good as you may have thought. Early indicators obviously are strong demand and growth in some way. Doesn't necessarily have to be revenue. Maybe you're not monetizing the product early on, but some of the indicators that are important to you have to grow. Whether that's users logging in, users coming back, general traffic, transaction volume. There has to be some North Star metric that you define for yourself that's growing. That's typically one of the best indicators for having reached product market fit. And finally, we're coming to the last slide. Once you have launched, and even once you are confident you actually have achieved product market fit, what you will want to do is you will want to measure and optimize your product. Because obviously, there's always new competitors that are coming to the market. The world is not static, especially in Web3. There's a lot of changes going on really continuously, and so you'll need to observe your metrics. What I recommend is to use Dapp radar, for example. Here you can compare your Dapp to other Dapps in terms of TVL. DeFi Llama, by the way, is a similar site. TVL, transaction volume, unique active wallets. So I would say Web3 type core metrics, and you can see them for your own app when you submitted it to Dapp radar, and you can compare with competitors, which is also often quite helpful. If you see that a competitor is growing much quicker than you are, then this can trigger thinking about, why is that the case? What can I improve? How can I do things better than my competitors? And that will obviously inform further product and go-to-market related decisions. So ultimately, you will always be in a state of ongoing optimization because you will never be alone. There will always be people who might want to eat your lunch, and you have to always look at how can you develop your product, your go-to-market approach further. That's it. I think we can wrap it up here, but obviously happy to discuss either right now or later on. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I'll go again. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about your own product and then how you apply some of the strategies to.
So just to briefly sum it up again, what we have is essentially a no-code tool that allows you to launch tokens and other smart contracts without programming the underlying smart contract yourself. We have a convenient user interface, you log in with a wallet, and then you can specify details of the token, like token name, token supply, etc. And literally with a click of a button, you can launch a token. You own the token. It's in your wallet. You own the smart contract. And then you can do a token sale. You can do an airdrop with the token, etc. We iterated until we arrived to this product through way worse versions of other tokenization engines. So it has been an evolution. We launched the product because we had initial market demand. What we did, we launched our own token. It was the first tokenized security that was approved by the regulator in the German market. And when we launched that, we had a lot of demand from both financial institutions, but also smaller startups, whether they could use the tokenization technology that we built, because they didn't want to build it themselves. So there was market demand, and we knew that there is market demand, so then we started to productize what we built for ourselves. So it wasn't kind of like a greenfield approach, but we already had something that we built for our own purposes, and we knew that there is demand. But then the product that we built early on, looking at it from today, was a really bad product. It was bad because it was really expensive for us to deploy it for our users, because it wasn't self-served. We had to install it on-premise, or our users would need to install it in their own AWS account, for example. So it was a super complicated onboarding process. And, you know, it wasn't like a, you know, one click of a button, but there was a really, you know, engineering resources for every new customer involved. So plus the product itself, the features that it had weren't really flexible. It only served maybe 10, 20% of the needs of our users. We knew that relatively early on, but we were kind of stuck with this product. We had 5 or 6 enterprise users, and we had to serve them. But they were paying us money, so we were making revenue with it. But we knew this is a bad product. But it was extremely hard for us to start developing a new product while we had to serve existing customers. So if you have a greenfield approach, a lot of things are easier. The downside is you may not have early revenue. So the good thing that we had early revenue because we had real users who were paying us, you know, fairly decent money for what we gave them, even though the product was really bad. And then at some point we were saying, okay, we have to replace this product. This is not sustainable. If we keep going like this, you know, we will be out of business in a year or two. And then we did a bit of a greenfield approach because first the idea was, okay, let's optimize the existing product. But then,
did you communicate this early on with your customers that you knew that the product wasn't really?
no, we did not. We did not. We made improvements on the product. So they gave us feedback. It wasn't always the greatest feedback, and we were improving. But the initial thought was, well, let's improve the product that we have. That's kind of the natural thing that you do, right? You have a product, you know, why throw it away? Why build something new from scratch? But at some point, we had to admit to ourselves it doesn't make sense anymore to work on this product. We have to launch something new from scratch because otherwise it's not going to work. And so then we did that, and the transition wasn't easy because we had to maintain the old product and, you know, allocate some resources to building the new. It became a lot easier once we had a really good idea what the new product can look like. And of course, you know, the way, you know, markets evolve, we did not come up with something entirely new from scratch, but we were doing really deep market research until we found others who are building something that's slightly similar to what we do, and that gave us a lot of ideas to come up with something new. But our product is essentially a combination of what others have already done, which of course is not a surprise. I mean, this is true for a lot of products in the market, right? We did not come up with something completely revolutionary, but we combined things that we saw. One of the big changes that we did is initially the product was not a Web3 app. You could not log in with your wallet, but you had to create username, password, etc. Once we forced ourselves to think about how we can turn this into a Web3 app, it also started to solve other problems almost by itself. Somehow the solutions then started to kick in. But this initial step wasn't easy. But yeah, the greenfield approach helped us to then think about the product in a completely new way. I think that was the most important step that we took when we admitted to ourselves the old product cannot be fixed. And then we did a soft launch as well, so we didn't, you know, really make a big announcement. Then after a while, after we had some first initial user feedback on the new product, then we kind of made an announcement, oh, we launched this new product, but we actually already had some early users. And fortunately, the user feedback was really good. So we were really happy because it turned out that what we thought we learned was actually true, and the feedback that we got from users was consistent with what we thought, you know, the issues that the users have and how we can solve it. But also a lot of kind of lessons learned went into that from the old product, which was bad, and you know, we collected the feedback the hard way.
When did you say you started?
So the company was started in 2013. So Bitbon is up and running for quite some time. Initially, we had a completely different business model. So not even a different product, but we started as a lending platform. But then we got into tokenization in 2019. So we're doing a tokenization product since around about 5.5 years.
Okay, so 2019 that you started with tokenization, was it a B2C product or was it a B2B product?
At the beginning, it was B2B only. part of the reason was, as I just mentioned, we had to deploy each instance of the product separately. So you could not really turn the old product into a B2C product, even if we wanted to. But we also had other hypotheses about the market. So I was now focusing on the product itself, but also the market turned out to function in a different way than we thought. We thought the B2B market was bigger, but it turned out not to be as big as we thought. And so the new product, on the one hand, we were able to serve our B2B customers, but we could also onboard B2C customers. And right now, the B2C revenue is bigger than the B2B revenue. But we have a product that can serve both.
Yeah, I can imagine. My question is, you said that early on you had customers, and that's, for me, sort of hard to imagine. Back in 2019, there were businesses that were looking into tokenization, like they found you and they were eager to pay for your product.
Yes.
It was, they went on the net, I believe, and they Googled
So,
you and they found you, or you had another.
You could say we had a certain community to a certain degree. So it was a bit atypical, but we did have a community because we did our own token sale. And even though there were a lot of ICOs that already happened by the time, we were literally the first ones to do a regulated security token offering. And so a lot of people were really interested in that, were following us, were talking to us, and that's how we created the initial demand. So while it wasn't like textbook style community-led approach, the fact was that we did have a community, and that's where the demand for the product came from. Yeah. Great. I think looking at the time, it's 5 p.m. I would suggest we wrap it up, but I'll still be around here and happy to, continue talking about these topics over a drink or some food, I believe, is coming.
Food which arrived also,
Soll ich Stream beenden?